Now, we go much beyond that, and our cognitive powers, while grounded in sense perception, come to be much richer. We also have the power to form what we call concepts, so we can engage in conceptions about the world. And what we do in this case here is we take particular entities, particular things, particular actions, properties, and so forth, and we group them into categories and assign a word or a label to them. So what we have here, for example, are abstract classifications. So for example, with my eyes, if I have a number of people, say in my classroom, I can look at all of the individual human beings. I can see them all as particular entities. They all are slightly different sizes, slightly different shapes, slightly different colors. If I were close enough, slightly different smells. And I can then be aware of them sensorially as particular entities. But at the same time, I also have the ability to abstract from all of those particular differences and see them as members of a category, an abstract category. They're all human beings, and so I treat them according to that label, and I will assign a word to it. This, as far as I know, and as far as we know, is the distinctively human mode of cognitive operation. There's lively debates, of course, among animal psychologists about whether animals also have the ability to form some rudimentary concepts. I don't want to pronounce on those debates as well. But as far as I know, the most gung-ho advocates of animal concepts are that animals can understand the world more abstractly and conceptually. They will at most make the claim that animals have a handful or at most a dozen or 24 possible concepts that they can form abstractly and retain. Whereas we know with respect to human beings, fairly quickly when our conceptual ability comes online, it's open-ended, and the average 2-year-old already has hundreds of concepts at his or her disposal. And by the time we are adults, we have tens of thousands of concepts at our disposal. All right, I want to make a couple of points about the learned nature of concepts as opposed to the more or less automatic nature of sense perception here, and also the way in which concepts give us an amazing power to understand the world in a way that perception is limited here. First, on the learned point here, if you take, for example, the concept of dog. So if a child is born in a household that has a dog or some dogs, one of their earliest words will be the word doggy. And I can remember my son, for example, when he was 7, 8, or 9 months or so, because we have a couple of dogs in the house, Dad picked up the word doggy. I thought he had the word doggy, but then I realized fairly quickly that he didn't quite have the word doggy, because when we would go for a drive, coming from our house into town, we would ride past a horse farm, and there would be horses out in the field, and he would be pointing at the horses and saying doggy, right? And I would have to teach him, no, that's horse. Dogs are a little bit different. Clearly what he had initially taken was something on the order of a 4-legged animal, which is a more abstract and generic kind of animal. Or there can be a friendly rivalry between mothers and fathers over whether the kid's first word is going to be mama or dada. Dads usually win that one because dada is apparently easier for kids to form the words in their mouth than mama is. And so dads will be very pleased and proud that the kid has figured out dada. Yeah, that's me, I'm dada, and encourage the kid to learn that word. But in some cases, there are lots of reports of then the kid going out with the parents somewhere, and there'll be some guy in the supermarket or wherever, and the kid will say dada, pointing to the man, and their parents are very quick to unteach that application of the word dada. That's not dada, that's just some guy, or that's man, or that's male, and dada refers to this particular individual with whom you have a special relationship. So, first point here is that these are learned. Okay, and as we go through life, we can continue to learn them. We group them into more abstract categories. We parse them out into finer grained categories until we have a very rich conceptual classification scheme in our minds that we carry around as adults and hopefully can use fairly effectively. All right, that's the learned point here. An issue of the power of concepts. There's a very famous set of experiments to illustrate the power of concepts having to do with a series of crows that, imagine this is a kind of a meadowy area here, and the ornithologists who were studying the birds knew that the crows would congregate here in the evening, and on either side of this there were some woods. So drawing some trees over here, we've got some woods. And there's a path that comes out of the woods here, there's the meadow, crosses the meadow, and then it comes over here. And then over here, near the edge of the woods, there is a little hut that was constructed with a doorway in it. And so started to do some experiments here. We had the experimenters over here. What they did was they would send a human being out of the woods here toward the meadow. Naturally, the crows would see the human being approaching. They would be startled and alerted. They would take off. They would fly up into the trees. The person would then cross the meadow and go into the hut and stay there for a little while. Then after a while, the human would leave. The crows then would see that it's safe. They would come back and resume their crow activities, whatever those are, in the meadow here. Next round of the experiment, we take two people. They approach the meadow. The crows see them, fly up into the trees. Two people go into the hut here, stay a little while. After a while, one person leaves and goes back here. The crows, however, stay up in the trees because they know there's still one person in the hut, and so it's not then, in their judgment, safe for them to come down. After the one person leaves and returns this way, the crows then will come down and resume their activities. Next round of the experiment. Three people come out of the woods here, crows fly up into the trees, three people go into the hut. After a while, two people leave. The crows stay up in the trees. They don't come down until that third person comes out of the hut and returns. 4 people, 5 people. My understanding is that if you have 5 people come out of the woods, crows fly up into the trees, 5 people go into the hut here, stay a little while, 4 will leave. At that point, the crows will then come down and resume their crow activities in the meadow again, not knowing that there still is a 5th person here. Now the point here is that the crows clearly have the ability to perceive and retain in the crow memory up to maybe 4 units. Beyond that, they have no ability to discriminate and retain in any form. Quantity matters here. So crow math is a matter of 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, but beyond that, a lot. And the a lot is just an undifferentiated, insignificant category for them. Now, the point that we can do as human beings is develop concepts not simply of nouns like dogs and human beings, but also concepts of quantity, which are abstract groupings themselves. And those are open-ended concepts so that we can go well beyond 4, 5, we can get up to the teens, the hundreds, and of course we can take any of the units and subdivide them indefinitely. And this gives us a very powerful grasp on quantitative relationships in the world. Like the crows, though, if we were limited simply to our perceptual abilities, simply looking, say, at a number of discrete particular entities and trying to retain them and discriminate them without counting, that is to say, without using abstract numerical concepts, we too would be limited. We might be able to get up to 7, 8, or 9 if we are very perceptually acute here, but beyond that, we can't retain through perception. So what we need, and what we fortunately have, is an ability to abstract away from those particulars and retain an awareness of a reality in a more abstracted, nonetheless accurate form that captures certain relationships in reality.